And we're taking you live now to Hyderabad House in central Delhi, where the summit meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Vladimir Putin is going to be starting in just minutes from now. Great deal of diplomatic energy rests on this brief meeting between the two world leaders. The meeting takes place in the wake of a hugely substantive and important milestone 2+2 dialogue between the two countries. The first ever time that they've engaged in this manner, and a 2+2, that is the foreign ministers and the defense ministers of both sides. They've signed deals that are very far-reaching and not just symbolic, high-value deals that in many ways play enabler to the India-Russia relationship and affirm what has basically been a relationship that has been buffeted by India's many recent diplomatic ventures, including its closeness to the United States, but is once again a reminder that the India-Russia friendship is here to stay. It's definitely not going to be evaporating or being eroded anytime soon. Prime Minister Modi has already arrived at Hyderabad House. President Putin will be arriving in just a short while from now. There are arrangements for a guard of honor that will be taking place as well. That's a wide image there of the Hyderabad House. I want to bring in Gaurav Sawant once again in on this. Sandeep Unithan and Geeta Mohan also with me live. All of us tracking this developing story. There is likely to be Gaurav, a joint statement by the two world leaders at the end of their summit. Is that right?
There will be one, and Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla will be briefing journalists about what transpired in this meeting. But Shiv, this is one relationship, India and Russia, that's only set to grow in times to come, and it's not restricted to any one field. While it remains a fact that Russia is one of the biggest military hardware supplier to India, but that's not the only field where the two countries are cooperating, even on strategic issues, on oil, on gas, on nuclear power plants in our country. In every Sandeep Unithan and I were just having a conversation that whether it's your Gaganyaan, where you're training your cosmonauts, your astronauts are training in Russia, or any other aspect, this is one relationship, and military hardware and spares. So your tanks, you're buying some 400 odd T-90, additional 400 T-90 tanks, your helicopters, your fighter jets, so many fields, from small arms to missiles, everything's coming from Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the India-Russia arms pipeline, has been one of the most dependable steel reinforced aspects of this relationship. And in fact, Sandeep, visited Russia not very long ago. He sent us this report. He filed this report about the multifarious elements in the India-Russia military trade, which, make no mistake, provides the underpinning for this very strong relationship. Take a look at Sandeep's report from Russia. It's one of the biggest military shows of its kind in the world. Army 2021 is where Russia opens the show window to its military-industrial complex. Russia is one of India's largest weapon suppliers, with deals worth $15 billion being negotiated or under execution at this time. It will deliver the first of 5 systems of the S-400 long-range anti-aircraft missiles for the Air Force later this year, and an Akula-class nuclear-powered attack submarine and Krivak-class frigates for the Navy by 2026. In the pipeline are deals for assault rifles, light helicopters and tanks.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Battle Cry from the Army 2021 Defense Exhibition in Moscow. Today we're going to take you through the latest Russian hardware that the Indian Armed Forces are going in for, from the AK-203 assault rifle to the Sprut light tank and the Kamov 226 light helicopter.
China's aggression in Ladakh last year has added a new impetus to the Indian Army's requirements for modern military hardware. The Army needs new hardware specifically for those fighting at high altitude.
The Indian Army, in its quest for a new assault rifle, has zeroed in on the Russian AK-203. The AK-203 is a modern version of the iconic Russian rifle designed after the Second World War. We went downrange with the AK-203. Heavily modernized version of the AKM. You have a lot of polymer furniture, the handguards and the grip. It's got a fixed and folding and adjustable stop and a dust cover here that flips up. Now, as you know, the AK family has that comes off, but this is hinged dust cover. This is one of the biggest problems of the AK, older AK family of rifles, that they didn't have a Picatinny rail. Has a cover with an integrated Picatinny rail, and it fits in right here.
The Kalashnikov company calls the AK-203 the ideal weapon for Indian conditions because it has been field tested in -50 degrees in fine sand and tropical conditions. The Indian Armed Forces need over 7 lakh rifles worth over 12,000 crore rupees. These weapons will be built at the Ordnance Factory in Amethi, Uttar Pradesh by a joint venture, Indo-Russian Rifles. Price negotiations on the contract are still underway. Meanwhile, the Indian Armed Forces have placed an order for 70,000 AK-203s this year as an emergency purchase, with the first rifles to be delivered this year itself. It's clearly a weapon they cannot wait for any longer.
The Indian Armed Forces are looking for a replacement for their Cheetah and Chetak light utility helicopters. 4 years back, they signed a deal to jointly produce the Kamov 226 Sergei. More on this machine here.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a 2015 agreement to jointly produce the Kamov 226. Both nations are currently negotiating a deal over the indigenous component of 200 helicopters to be built in India. India wants Russia to increase the indigenous content in the helicopters and also transfer critical technologies. Meanwhile, Russian Helicopters has fielded an improved variant of the Kamov 226. The Kamov 226 Climber is a lighter, stronger and modernized version of the original light multi-mission helicopter and based on India's new requirements for this.
Конкретный данный вертолет создавался под требования тендера Министерства обороны Индии.
The things that we can say is yes, the negotiations are underway. We cannot comment on the status of the negotiations, unfortunately, but we need to say that when designing this helicopter, the specifications from the Indian Ministry of Defense were taken into account.
The Kamov 226T that you see here could be the biggest example of joint technical collaboration between India and Russia since the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. But both countries have to first iron out their differences over the deal. The Indian Army is one of the world's largest operators of the Russian-made T-72 and T-90 medium tanks. But after its deployment in Ladakh last year at heights of over 12,000 feet, it realized the requirement for a new light tank, which explains a contract for over 350 light tanks, where the Russian-built Sprut light tank is one of the front runners. Take a look at the Sprut's capabilities.
It floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee. Meet Russia's Sprut SDM-1. It's a light tank, but armed with a heavy gun. A light but lethal platform that packs a formidable punch. It can engage targets on land and on the surface of the water. During the standoff in Ladakh last year, the People's Liberation Army brought to the border its new Type 15 light tank, capable of being speedily moved across the line of actual control. This year, the Indian Army formally revived its own light tank project. It aims to acquire 350 such tanks for high-altitude areas where medium tanks like the T-72 and T-90 cannot be deployed. The Army could possibly buy a smaller number of such tanks off the shelf.
What really tilts the scales in the favor of the small tank is this, the 2875 125mm main gun. This is the same gun that the Army has on the T-72 and T-90 tanks. So it's, from the Army's point of view, is great for standardization.
The other aspect of this tank is that it shares a fire control system as the other T-series tanks and turret components. But the gun is the clincher. A gun of this size, a 125mm gun on a chassis that is 20 tons, just a little heavier than a BMP-2, is from the Army's point of view exactly what it needs to fight at high altitude.
The Indian Army has operated tanks at high altitude since 1948, but it's not had a light tank in service for the past few decades. Now that changed when the PLA deployed its own tanks in Ladakh last year. The Army has accelerated its requirement for light tanks. It wants over 350 light tanks like this one, the Russian-built Sprut STMI light amphibious tank. This is Sandeep Punithan at the Army 2021 for India Today.
We're taking a very quick break. President Putin about to arrive there. We're going to get you the images of his arrival right after this break. And we've got the best analysis of what happens when President Putin and Prime Minister meet as well.